So hello and welcome to another podcast style video today. I'm going to be chatting to Michael Peart, who's a really great friend, great international archer. He used to be world #2 in Compound, then switched to recurve archery to try and make the 2012 Olympic team in London. That was a home games. Mike's also from the UK like myself. So Compound to recurve, and then after London he went to become the head coach for the Archery GB Paralympic team, and then led that team to their most successful ever Paralympic Games in Rio in 2016. So a complete wealth of knowledge. I'm sure you're going to learn a load from this interview / discussion. Mike is also, like myself, an online coach. He's doing online compound coaching. So if you're a compound archer watching this, you want to find out more about Mike, or you want to ask him some questions, get in contact for coaching, go to archerymichael.com. I'll put a little title here and you can definitely check that out. But now let's get into the video and hopefully you can take away a lot from this. Mike, thanks so much for joining us. I've just done a little intro there but for anyone that maybe hasn't seen you before on the field, or they've probably actually seen your athletes at the Rio Paralympics, can you just kind of give everyone a little bit of a background of your archery journey, kind of when you started archery, and then also your switch from compound to recurve, you know, pursuing the Olympic career as well? I think everyone would love to hear about that to start.
No, absolutely, no problem. So I started on my 14th birthday, just looking for a new hobby, and archery seemed really cool. I'd done my beginner's course, like most people do, and I could have easily have just stayed with the recurve bow, but somebody at the club was selling this beautiful camouflaged compound bow. I remember it being £20, and for me as a 14-year-old, a camouflage, cool-looking bow for £20, no brainer. And then I started compound, started with my fingers, and progressed on from there. So there was no big decision. I didn't know the differences between the bows. People at my club shot both and switched around, and they still do that now. So it didn't seem like a big deal, and I certainly wasn't even aware that archery was an international sport or in the Olympics, so there was none of that come into it. I just, like so many people, wanted to go to the club, shoot arrows, watch them fly through the air, and have fun. So I did that, and then that progressed, and then by the time I was 17, I found myself on the British team. And honestly, as soon as I made that selection shoot and made the team, I felt like my life from that point onwards totally and utterly changed. You know, it was never the same again. From that summer in '94, my life was all about archery and all about focusing on that and trying to get the best performance I can. Compound went well. I got numerous medals, World Cup medals. I was never a champion. Well, I won the face-to-face in the Mexican Olympic Festival and things like that, but I wasn't a world champion or a European champion, but we got team medals. You know, we were team champions. But as you said, you've said before, I retired at World No.2, and the reason I retired is because go on. Sorry.
I was going to say you downplayed that a little bit with the. I think you said we were okay, but World No.2. I think that's But no, I think that's great. So when you went from, obviously you were World No.2, you were shooting there, you were shooting team rounds, obviously world champs. Teams, that sort of thing. And there's some videos, if anyone wants to have a look, actually watch on YouTube. There's some great videos of the compound matches as well. But so you went from that. What was the desire to switch to recurve?
When you're on the team, you spend so much of your time with the team. And of course, by I mean the team, I mean the recurve and the compounds. You're sharing rooms, you're traveling together, and you feel like one team. And then all of a sudden, especially back then, it felt like you went from being one team and someone knocked on the door, and for that Olympic year, your recurve friends disappear and have a whole entire life, and us compound guys are left at home. And then also as things got more professional, we had it where recurve athletes started to get lottery funding. They started to, so they were, let's say, maybe not in the top 50 or 100 in world. They were getting paid to train full time, and me as World No.2, I think I had to pay £1,000 to go to the World Championships in '99.
Yeah, a bit of a disparity with.
And that sort of that got me thinking about, and also from my point of view, whenever I tried recurve, I was successful at it. I remember
Yeah.
We had a World Indoor Championships, and it finished. I think as a compound archer, I maybe got fourth there or something. I can't really remember, but I certainly didn't win. But when I come home, the National Championships were the next weekend, so I thought, okay, I'll try recurve and just end the indoor season with a bit of fun. And I won the National Indoor Championships. So I was my first tournament of shooting recurve. I was national champion. So I thought, well, obviously I'm not terrible at it.
Here,
So the following year, after the World Championships, I decided, after the Outdoor World Championships, so I think it was just after 9/11. That's how I can remember the date. Not a good one.
Yeah.
But in China, I packed up. I got, individual. We got a team. What did we get in China? I think we got a team bronze medal. I think, and I packed up my compound and put it away. And looking back now, I'm amazed that I could just pack it up, put it under my bed, and never really touch it again. I did just switch over, and the next day, I was a recurve archer. And I made that change.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, I look back on it and it surprised me.
You said there was like and there was a particular time as well. Like I think I asked you a little bit before, like when did you switch from compound to recurve? And you said you can remember like the exact time. What was the story with that?
It's the 21st of September at 3:30 p.m. That was when our medal match on the compound finished. I remember just looking at the time and date and thinking, that's it. And I put it away, and I never competed with compound again, really. Well, I didn't. I done a club shoot, but nothing more than that, I did just pack up and change. And looking back, that was a bold decision. Whether it was the right decision is a huge... I could debate for hours what my life would be if I'd have stayed compound, but...
In compound,
I've had an adventure shooting recurve, so...
Yeah. And that's crazy going into recurve that, not quickly, but in terms of going from compound, switching to recurve and then having that success so kind of quickly early on in indoors.
Yes. No, just to expand on that also. So yes, I won the national championship, but I retired from compound in September. By the March, in the British team, we'd won the first championship medal. The recurve team, we won at a European indoor. We got a championship bronze, and that was the first championship medal that GB had for over 10 years. So to me, it felt not only have I become national champion, but I've gone to my first international with a recurve, and we've delivered a historic result. Here we come,
Pretty,
here come their Olympic Games.
I think I'd be like that as well.
And then I went outside.
And but with that, before we go on to the outside stuff, because I think this is really, really interesting, kind of going on to the stuff in terms of, moving from compound to recurve, what maybe didn't translate over in skills and how it changes indoors to outdoors. But just to give a bit of context as well, that's with the indoors, wasn't the score you shot, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, was it like 590 something or something around that area? What was in terms of the scoring?
Yeah, so I mean, on the compound, I think my best at that time, which I think was the British record, was 593 on the small 10 for an 18-meter feeder. And indoors, almost immediately I was shooting 580. Not every time, to be honest with you, but I certainly was able to perform. And at that time, 580 was enough to win your tournaments. Later on in my recurve career, I could do mid 90s. But
I remember seeing those on score sheets.
Yeah, I think the national record was 582 or something. It wasn't. It wasn't incredibly competitive back then. Things have moved on a long way.
Yeah, but with that indoors, I remember. I don't know. Maybe it was Izmir in Turkey. I remember looking at a results sheet and seeing I remember seeing a name, and this was when I was younger, maybe like 594 or I don't know, something around there, and thinking like, Jesus, that's.
Yeah, I think my best international. Actually, you've got the world champs. It was the world champs in Denmark.
Yeah,
I qualified first. Isn't it great that I can't remember if it was 594 or 595? You really think that would remember that, but I don't. But yeah, that was certainly my best. I would call that my best performance. To qualify first at a world championship, I ended up finishing 5th, so I didn't quite deliver on that potential. But it's certainly
good effort, though. Yeah,
for a recurve guy faking it, I thought I'd done okay.
Yeah, I think that's a good pass for sure. So what was the difference when you went outdoors? Because it sounds like there was a little bit of a little bit more difficult outdoors. What was the reason for that, do you think?
Yeah, so to be clear, I had not shot my recurve outside. So I had switched over.
Yeah.
Had a successful international indoor season, And then I literally remember I'd done a little bit of short range work setting up my X10s, because X10s were even around back then, and getting my bow ready. And then I remember my first ever training session at 70 meters. I really did think I was going to go out there and shoot a 650 or shoot something like that.
Yeah.
Because why not? I'm competitive internationally indoors, so I'm just going to go outside and boy, it didn't turn out like that. I remember leaving that first training session and calling my dad on the way home and just saying, he's like, how did it go? I was like, oh, this is going to take some work, because it just doesn't translate over, and it really doesn't. You can be world-class indoors and not hit a barn door outdoors. Obviously I'm exaggerating slightly, but yeah, it was a struggle. I mean, I want to think that the following season, just to try and get the point across, I had a indoor tournament where I done 4 rounds and I consistently shot over 590 on each of those rounds. Really good, world-class, steady shooting. And I then came home and it was actually decent weather outside, and I went and shot outside. You had that same exact feeling and technique, and I tried to pretend I was at 25 meters, and I shot that same shot, and I think I scored 301. So like 600 for the double. There's no comparison. They can be totally and utterly different shots. Indoor and outdoor can be, for people, just different shots. So that you can get led astray if you put too much focus into one over the other, or you have to decide what your priority is.
Because to give a bit of context as well, for anyone watching that's not sure, when someone shoots 590 18 meter indoor round, I'm assuming, so when I see someone shooting that level, in my mind I think, okay, 670 probably on a feet to 70 meter, somewhere around there in terms of like, and that's probably, and I probably would have thought that too if I was in that situation. So what do you think it was? What made it easier for you indoors compared to outdoors? Was it the fact that you were coming from Compound, and what skill did you have to develop more as you got? I just
want to pick up on your last comment where you look at those scores and you think about the differences. Back then we were also shooting feeters, and we got a new coach, Peter Sook, and we met him at the World Indoor Championships where I shot my 594. And I remember talking to him on the bus, and he was saying, what's your level outside? Meaning, what's my level on a feeder? And I said, my best is 1262. And he said, no, you mean 1362. And I'm like, no, I really don't. My best is 1262. Yeah. And he got me to write it down because he didn't believe you could qualify first at the World Indoor Championships and only deliver a mid 1200 outdoors. But there we go. So, your question, what are the differences? I would say for indoor recurve archery is much like compound archery. Obviously, this is for me, and maybe someone will tell you differently. But indoor archery is all about being really steady, having that great aim, and just having good timing. We'll always keep that timing in it. But your timing can be slow, as long as it's like consistent. But it's all about the aim. You just need to hold that bow still. And if your sight's on the 10 ring indoors, you'll hit the 10 ring.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter how bad this live release is, because trust me, a lot of the time my release was pretty bad. But indoors, you could blast on through and shoot those 590s. Now, the scientist in me says, well, if you're hitting the 10 ring at 18 meters, why is that arrow not continuing on to the 10 ring at 70 meters? But it's just not the same. For me, outdoor shooting is all about the swing, the golf swing, the speed of the shot, having that consistent shot, and your technique and your release is what gets it in the 10 ring at 70 meters. Whereas at 18 meters, I can do a horrendous shot, and if the sight pin's on the 10, you hit it. And I don't understand.
It doesn't make sense, right?
Nia, do you know why there is this discrepancy? Because it doesn't make sense to me. The scientist doesn't understand it.
Yeah, I'd like to say I understand. Honestly, it is very tricky too, because like you say, it makes sense that if it's going to shoot, in the group at 18 meters, it should outdoors as well. The only way that I can understand it a little bit is if you've got, I guess, take an archery example. If you've got an arrow going, I don't know what it's going, 100 miles an hour, say, and you've got a crosswind, it's going to be affected X amount by that crosswind. If you've got an arrow going 200 miles an hour and you've got a crosswind, then it's affected less by it. So the way I think about it is when you're doing the movement of the shot, if you can move faster, you're affected less by any little wobbles, that kind of thing. But there's still a part of me that completely agrees with you, and like you say, because you think, if I can shoot it at this distance, why does it not at 70 meters? But I had exactly the same thing as well, because I trained for a long time 18 meters in my parents' garden. That was like my early years of archery was indoor shooting, basically.
Okay.
So close range blank boss, 18 meters in the garden. I was good at aiming. I was good at indoors, and from a young age shooting like what I thought were good scores at indoor distances. And exactly like you, not quite the same amount, because I'd been doing some outdoor already, but I'd have the same thing. I'd be like, I shoot this score at 18. Why, even when I go to 30 meters, why is it not kind of comparable? And then when I go to 70s, they're so different. And
you're right to bring up
discrepancy.
You're right to bring up 30 meters there. I remember one summer where I don't think there was a single tournament where I didn't get the medal for best 30 meters. And yet I was like 12th in the tournament, you know, but I could shoot those 350s, 350s, what am I talking about? 358s, so I could shoot, great 30 meter scores, but I couldn't deliver at the long distance. And to sum it up, it's outdoor shooting is about the shot. You get rewarded for a good shot, and indoor shooting, you get rewarded for a good aim. Now, obviously, some people can do both.
Yeah, and that's the real, and this is why it's difficult, right? Because a lot of people will, especially depending on what the weather's like, through pretty much the whole winter, they'll maybe shoot indoors, especially maybe in the UK or anywhere where the weather's not great, really. They'll do that indoors, and then they'll go to outdoors, and suddenly they've basically been practicing aiming and not been able to do the dynamic movement, and then they go outdoors, and it's really difficult.
Dynamic movement, that is the key word there,
because
and for me, I found it led me astray, because I would spend 6 months of the year thinking I'm great, having people tell them I'm great, winning prize money, feeling like I'm on track, and then I'd hit that summer and boom, reality would hit. So I do wonder if I hadn't have done the indoor seasons, maybe I'd have made more progress outdoors. But then again, if I hadn't have done the indoor seasons, there's a chance I would have just packed up recurve because I wasn't getting any of the rewards and success that I liked. So it's a balance,
Yeah. And what would you say if you were doing that again now, what would you do, and what would you say that other archers listening could do to kind of mitigate that a little bit? Because this is the tricky bit. If you've only got 18 meters, you still kind of want to do some scoring. What are some things you can do, to kind of work on the dynamic movement while you're still doing the indoor distance?
First of all, it is decide what is the most important thing to you. Now, if that is you'd like to pick up a medal at Nîmes, or you'd like to go to face-to-face or win some prize money at Vegas, then fine, then accepted that you're going to be an indoor superstar and just get on with it, But if the focus, like with so many of us recurve archers, the focus is outside, everything else around it is just training. You can't... I think shooting with an open ring, a big open ring, so that it's trying to discourage you from doing that super aiming that might deliver those indoor results but punish you outside. You've always got to keep a focus on that timing. So maybe making sure you keep that blank boss training where you're keeping the rhythm. But I know that's really hard, because then you're not getting the feedback of where the arrows go. And I mean, any chance you can get during the winter to go outside and just grab that 1 hour, even if, because sometimes it might be still outside, it's freezing cold, but it's not actually windy. Well, if you dress appropriately, you can probably go out there for an hour or so. And if you can do that every week or so and just try and keep that outdoor memory, whereas I used to change my bows, fat arrows, big feathers, heavy points, and just totally focus on that indoor season, and then totally switch over. And back then, when we didn't have training camps, we didn't have the professional training, it was fine. I just switched from one to the other, and I couldn't shoot outdoors during the winter because all my bows were changed over to trying to win those indoor shoots. So work out what your priorities are, and then keep that like you said, that dynamic movement, whether that's getting outside when you can, keeping that blank boss. Don't let yourself over aim.
Yeah. It's so counterintuitive, isn't it? Because I mean, everyone probably watching this is thinking like, if you're shooting further, then you need to aim better because the target is further away. But it is literally the opposite.
This is not, and that's why I like to tell myself. It's why it took me so long to work it all out, because it's not the way you'd think it'd be. It's not intuitive, and I can't even remember anyone sort of telling me that, or maybe it's quite possible they were telling me this and I wasn't hearing it, because when you're winning prize money and being given medals, who wants to hear that you're going to pay the price outside? who cares? But I don't know. It's interesting. If I went back, I'd definitely try and keep one bow for indoors, one for outdoors, and just try and keep that outdoor mentality through the year. Or just embrace it and just, there's a part of me that thinks, what about if I just embraced indoor shooting and just made that my goal? I could have had an even more successful career. But there we go.
That's super interesting. I'd definitely encourage anyone like viewing now. I'd say an interesting exercise is to, when you go to an outdoor range, have a session at least where you say, okay, I'm just gonna aim on the target and shoot with good timing. Like, I don't care where on the target it is. I'm just going to basically do my shot. Sight pin needs to be on the target and shoot. And you will probably be surprised by the results. It's interesting. I don't know. It feels weird. It feels wrong when you're doing it. It feels like you're going to miss. But yeah, it's all
I also
about that
think
movement.
This is what being a coach should be. I want you to learn the things that took me 20 years to work out. Exactly, I want you to be fast tracked, and really that's sort of what coaching boils down to. Is I don't want you to have to learn at the speed I learnt at. I want you to take my 20 years and then put your learning on top of that, and that is, if I can save you 5 years trying to work something out, that's great. And that's that progress, isn't it? Yeah, and now that we have online classes and tutorials like what you do, they just didn't, the amount of information there was back in the 90s when I was learning, there's just nothing, there's so few scraps. Every time I met, a pro or someone who was a former champion, you were just desperate to get any bit of information because it just wasn't out there, so I hope people are learning faster nowadays. You really should do.
Yeah, no, I think it's great, and I think it's interesting with all the extra information. On a kind of side note, before we move on to the next bit, do you think that's why obviously all the scores continually go up and up? Even though I think archery is interesting because basically the X10 has just stayed the same for a long amount of time, but the scores just keep going up and up and up. Do you think it's that information and people getting a lot more knowledge around the world that's doing that, or do you think it's something else?
No, when you look at the kit people, when you look at what Justin Husch won the Olympics with back in '96, and you look at a bow now, don't get me wrong, companies have made progress. I do love those new Hoyts. They have made differences, but really, if you gave a modern athlete an Avalon Plus from '96, I don't think they'd have any problems, and I honestly don't think anyone's score is going to be having 50 points shaved off it. It is. Information has made the difference, and information is brought up. Yes, it makes a difference to the top guys, but it's also brought the pack up. There's now a lot more people who are shooting competently, and just the scores. Like we talk about the scores I used to shoot that could be competitive indoors. Now there'd be so many people beating that. And we've become more professional, especially us as a country. We didn't have academies and squads. Being on the British squad. For me, I think it was 4 weekends a year, I think. You'd have had the top 4 recurves, men and women, top 4 compounds, do that 4 times a year, you're on squad. Now, it'd be 4 days a week at least.
Yeah, so a bit of a difference there. No, that's crazy. Yeah. So in terms of obviously with your experience, I mean, World No.2 compound, and then we haven't actually said with this as well, I should give a bit of context as well. Mike wasn't just someone who shot compound, tried to go to recurve, and it didn't quite work out outdoors. I think maybe he hasn't given himself enough credit here, but I mean, Mike was going for the London Olympics, eventually finished in 4th place, but probably the most valiant effort I've ever seen in terms of. I remember watching the final. Obviously, there were many selection shoots. That this was a home games in London, and there were many selection shoots. The final one, I think you were a fair margin away from third place.
I was
at the time, Alan Wills, and I remember watching that, and that weekend was just. It was incredible to watch. It was just like clawing points away all weekend at a very fast pace. I don't know if anyone watches like Formula One or something, but you know when someone's tires hit the wall and then they just keep clawing them down. It was incredible, and Mike was very close to that third place, and it was incredible to watch.
They were fun times, but I also don't want to. I didn't achieve the goal I set out for myself, so I also don't want to wrap it up and say it was a massive success. Do I regret it? Not at all. I had 10 years as an international professional athlete. I do not regret that. I had such a wonderful time, a great education. Half of my insight I have now as a coach, I wouldn't have had if I hadn't have switched to recurve and spent those years as a pro. So I've got no regrets there. But I didn't achieve my goal. I got some World Cup medals. I got outdoor World Cup medals. So it wasn't a disaster outside, but it wasn't that initial. I can be a world-class performer. Just didn't really happen outside. I was much more of a third-place team member.
But still, definitely.
Yeah, I'm still grateful. I don't want to be dismissive. I'm grateful for my time with the recurve.
Yeah. And with those two experiences with the compound and recurve, what do you think? Because obviously everyone watching this, mainly from my side, will be interested in recurve, but I'm sure there's a few compound archers as well. What can recurve archers learn from compound archery?
Obviously, I'm going to be generalizing here. I think I often get a more sense of professionalism about equipment from the compound side than I do the recurve. So often I can meet, especially a youngster who's made it onto the British team, maybe even winning medals, and I ask them about their equipment and they know nothing. They just don't know what their brace height is. They don't know what. I just put it to that line there. They just don't.
Yeah.
Whereas often the compounds are far more professional in testing and knowing what their bow is set up and what works and what doesn't. Now, of course, we know the people who spend too much time on their equipment, but I meet so many recurves where it's almost suffering from neglect because people, what string do you use? Oh, the same string I've used for the last 5 years.
The one from the shop
champion told me. And that's so. I think a lot of the recurves could do better by the professional, the testing, try something and test. I hate it when someone says they buy a new button and they just get rid of their old one, or they trade it in at the shop, or they trade in their old pair of limbs and buy a new pair of limbs. No testing, no proof that it works. They just upgrade and move on, whereas there's no evidence. And the amount of times over the years I've seen someone take a nosedive and they can't go back because I sold my limbs. That's how I paid for the new ones. And I do understand that it's tough on a budget, but you do need to test and prove things. Even changing your fletchings, the amount of times someone's changed it to a different make just because it looks cool in fluorescent.
Someone else is shooting it.
I know that can make 5 points over 3 dozen. So 10 points on a 720. You can't afford to throw away 10 points like that, or maybe you've gained 10 points. But if you don't know, but I think the compounds are much better at that. If people like smaller. Fiddling, and if people like fiddling, they generally end up with a compound because it is more technical. It attracts that type of person, whereas maybe the recurve attracts a person who wants to be more fluid and more about the shot, and that will bring them success as well. So that's the difference. That's my little.
And do you think there's like a benefit? Because I see, obviously, we didn't really have Instagram as much way back. It wasn't really that easy to see what other people were doing, that kind of thing on social media. But now I see a lot more of the top archers also doing a little bit of compound, maybe a little bit of cross training with, some of the top recurve archers doing a bit of cross training with compound, doing some stuff like that. Do you think there's benefit to that for recurve archers?
I do, and to be honest with you, I regret not continuing that. I'd done lots of that when I was younger, and then when I became serious and professional, I stopped doing that. Whereas I think my club, we had the monthly postal leagues, and I'd shoot both disciplines. And I really think, I should have continued that. I should have continued to shoot both. Because also compound, when you're shooting a surprise shot, teaches you that feeling of you're not worried about when the shot's going to go off. You're just going to keep on pulling, and you're going to feel that explosion. And I definitely could have done with bringing some of that into my recurve shot to make this a bit more dynamic instead of a bit dead, which is always what I feel when I go back and watch those videos. Yeah, so I think if you can afford it, and you're shooting both is great. They're both fascinating sides to the sport, and it gives you a break from one, gives you an insight into another. Yeah, great idea.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I've only shot compound literally once or twice, but it kind of blasted through all the preconceptions I had about it. So I remember thinking, like, I'm just going to draw this compound back, just going to be rock steady, draw it back, sit here, and then just squeeze and shoot. And I thought it was going to be walk in the park, and really was not. Because the draw weight is so much lower at full draw, it was moving everywhere. I was like, why is it just wobbling so much? There's so much more control in the bow arm and the pressure point in the grip, and really making that fine. That I think can translate over as well, because some of the recurve archers that I work with, and in my coaching, I'll see sometimes during the shot they might draw up and the pressure point shifts, and I feel like when that's happening there, and then I can see it happening at the expansion as well. On a compound, if you do that in the expansion, because it's so light, I don't really know because I'm so bad at compound. But I imagine that would completely hit the
it's
scope
more sensitive.
up.
It is more sensitive. You can notice these things. It is, and there's only been a few of us, change over, but there is there is some successful people out there who have done both to a high level. Brady Ellison is the best example. The World Indoor Championships in 2005, where I qualified first, he qualified first on the compound. And I believe, the internet will tell me I'm wrong probably, but I think he won the Junior World Championship that year. He certainly qualified first. I think he won. So he's gone from a compound world champion, junior, to now, he's fairly good with a recurve, isn't he?
Yeah. That's funny. Awesome. So in terms of, obviously, that there's kind of a little bit of cross training people can do, stuff they can learn from each kind of part. What would you say, thinking about kind of not just beginners, but maybe fairly new archers or kind of club level archers that might be watching, if they're fairly new, what common mistakes do you see both recurve and compound making that could be avoided and that they should watch out for? So maybe we'll start with compound, if that's, maybe we'll start with that.
Yeah, compound, I guess it feels like 90% of the time they end up with too long a draw length, and they're leaning over back. They're leaning into the shot. And most of the time, if I meet a new athlete, they're shooting their compound too long, and they're sort of laying into the shot. And it's learning how to shoot that release aid. The release aid is the bit that I want to say it sort of makes or breaks your compound career. It's at a certain point it gets to the realization that the only thing that's difference between a lot of people is how they shoot that release aid, and learning that surprise shot, which is a whole video in its own. Learning that surprise shot, once you can do that, the compound is quite forgiving. You can shoot. There's been multiple champions with bent front arms. Morgan Lundin, quite an extreme case, and there's multiple champions like Dave Cousins who have quite typical recurve technique. You can get away with it. The thing they have in common is they're both masters of the release aid, and that's the bit that's tying it through. But learning from someone how to shoot a release aid before you even sort of start is great. Get some advice before that first lesson, and getting someone to help you set up your draw length, because I think if you've been shooting recurve too long a draw length on a compound, it feels comfortable, but when you actually step back and look at it,
then it's
really
left back.
I just see that all the time. It's because it's comfortable. It feels comfortable. So that's how people. If you're not told otherwise, if you're just given a bow and you set it up yourself, you generally set it up too long and you sort of lay into the shot.
Yeah. No, that makes complete sense. And in terms on the kind of recurve side, obviously you've got a unique perspective because you were super experienced in archery generally already, in terms of all the scoring, everything. You didn't have, when someone starts archery, there's so many new things, like just even knocking the arrow is really weird. and just all that fiddly stuff. But you had all of that pretty much done, and you just had the skill of recurve. Are there some key mistakes? So obviously the aiming we kind of touched on already. Are there other things? Yeah.
Yeah, I want to mention the bit you just mentioned there, knocking the arrow.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I've got a whole story with that, because on a compound, we want those knocks really tight. You want a nice hard click. So I set my recurves up exactly like that. Which at my first sort of team camp, I realized is not what you want on a recurve. And going from a tight knock point to one that was, as the Olympic athletes showed me, that changed the tune of my bow so much that I had to cut 1.25 inches off my arrows to make them come into tune. So just my lack of knowledge when it came to knock points totally ruined the tune of my bow.
Yeah.
So even though I was an archery expert, which I was, I knew nothing about recurve knock points, and recurve knock points do not want to be super, super tight. It ruins your bare shaft tune and totally leads you astray. So I had pitfalls like that. And the other side of it was just not understanding that dynamic nature of a successful recurve shot and just shooting it like a compound. I just drew up onto the tip of the clicker, aim, expand, click. And it worked to a point. It certainly worked indoors, but it wouldn't carry over. Whereas I think if I'd have had more coaching early on, which some of the British coaches, Richard Priestman was trying to get me straight away onto the recurve team, but it's hard to justify, I want to put this compound archer on the recurve program because he's won the indoor championships and things like that. But that's, they want to see outdoor results. I think nowadays our head coaches have more freedom. They're given more trust. Their opinion, there's no point paying them lots of money if you don't trust their opinion. So nowadays I would have been fast tracked on, and I probably would have avoided a lot of these pitfalls, and maybe I would have avoided some of the long-term bad habits. It's quite possible, and I like to think that's the case.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And in terms of that, if you were working on that again, knowing what you know now, would it be a case of, don't want to put words in your mouth, but would it be a case of kind of focusing less on the anchor and just saying to yourself, okay, I'm just going to kind of come up, pull through it and keep going? What would the cue be for you to do that?
Yeah, I definitely think I treated my anchor point like I did with my compound. I'm drawing up. Now I'm stopping. Now I'm stopping. Now I'm going to pull through the shot. Whereas with a compound, I'll draw up, stop, and pull through the shot. I was doing the same on my recurve, and really, I never was able to sort of break that. I really wasn't. Some athletes can't break it, so they just embrace it. And maybe I'd have been more successful if I'd have done that. But I tried to get that, and I could never get a consistent draw. So then I was always anxious and nervous and never quite got maybe we could have broken that if I'd have had correct tuition on day one and not just done it all on my own. Maybe we wouldn't. You just don't know.
Yeah, it's one of those things, I guess, isn't it? No, I think that's really interesting. I see that with a lot of archers as well. Kind of the name anchor is a little bit tricky as well because it implies that complete stop. But treating that anchor as a little bit more of a something that you go through rather than to I definitely think is a good way to think about it, preventing that kind of.
I think a lot of coaches would have had me treating it really fluid and not having me, shoot a competition the first day I change over and things like that. It would. I like to think if a top compounder now was going to do it, it would be managed differently, and he would have that support because our coaches are aware that you can fast track athletes from one to the other.
Yeah, and I think also in terms of fast tracking, that's a good point as well. Kind of a segue onto when you were the head coach of the Paralympic team. Obviously, you did some. I mean, we can see behind there's some excellent pictures from the Rio Paralympics as well. You had a super successful Rio Paralympics. And rightly so. I think was that the most successful archery GB Paralympics for archery?
Yes, certainly for recent times, and when we were number one on the medal table, which was something I didn't realize till the games was over, which was fantastic. But also the thing I'm probably most proud of is 5 of those medals were from new athletes that I had recruited within that cycle, and a coach's ability to spot who can be fast tracked, and then having a performance director
Sarah Symington trust me to do that was the reason we could do that. Whereas sometimes if you have a rigid process that you have to follow, you can miss these opportunities, especially in Paralympic sport where boundaries and athlete conditions are always changing. You've got to react. Olympic sport, you have to move fast to adapt, but in Paralympic, you've got to spin. You never know. Several times I lost my number one athlete to a classification change. You've got to move and find that next person, because it's never going to be a static game. If you have a static team for 4 or 5 years, you're probably going to fail at the next games. You've got to keep moving.
And I think that's a great thing as well in terms of for the athletes, because then that promotes competition amongst them as well, and it drives everyone up as well, doesn't it? Because they know there's people that are going to be coming up on the team, that kind of thing. Whereas if it gets stagnant, then people start.
But it also, for an athlete's point of view, it creates a lot of unrest, a lot of uncertainty. I know as an athlete, you hate it. It really does make your life difficult and make you angry at the coach for bringing people on. And I had that when I was the third place man, hanging on for dear life. I hate it when people like yourself start to do well. It's a threat. So as an athlete, you don't want it, and you hate your coach for bringing on new people and giving them a chance at an international. But the coach has got the responsibility to deliver the teams, deliver the medals to the government who are paying the bill. It's UK Sport are giving us the money. It's their money to do with as they want, and they want medals. So let's do what the paymasters are saying. But it's tough as an athlete. Because of course, with all these things, I've had it from both sides.
So you've got that perspective on both. And in terms of that fast tracking, I guess a lot of those fast track athletes were compound, but there were also some new recurve athletes. Say if someone's watching this, they're a recurve archer, club archer. What are some of those kind of fast track principles maybe that they can take that can really make big impacts in their training? So say maybe they shoot like, I don't know, maybe they shoot like 550 on a feet to 70 meter at the moment, and they want to kind of break up to 600, but they don't really have that much training time per week. So they don't, maybe they've got 3-4 days a week that they can do a couple of hours or something like that, or maybe even a little bit less. What would you say is like maybe 1 or 2 key things for recurve archers that they could do to really make a big difference?
I think it's always great to establish what are the goals, what do we have to work with, and then maximizing that time. And one of the things I can always find that almost anyone can fit into their training is certainly bow training, where you're doing the bow drills at full draw makes a huge difference. So then when you are training, you're practicing your skill and you've got the muscle capacity to shoot. And more pretty much, if you tell me you can't find 10 minutes in the morning or 10 minutes in the evening to do those exercises, well, you're probably not going to make it as an athlete. We're probably not going to work out, because if you can't find 10 minutes, you're probably not going to find any medals either. And so many people don't want to seek coaching until they're good. Whereas actually, I have no problem with coaching some athletes who have only been doing it, 7 weeks or 7 months or even 7 days, because yes, we don't need intensive hours and hours of training, but insight from a coach while you're developing can just save so much time. And make you fast track so much make you fast track, much quicker, and get that speed. Right, I constantly hear it as when I get better, I'm gonna get some coaching. Whereas having an hour's coaching when you're at any level can just make things go along fast. And they're sure when you become almost a pro, then you want coaching on a daily or weekly basis. But just having some insight early on can just save so much time. And
because I mean, in your case, because like in your case, even just being told, like if someone had said to you at the start, forget everything you think about aiming, just do not aim really very much, and just pull through much quicker, and don't try and stop here. If they just laid it out in like super simple terms like that, that just took 30 seconds, whatever.
What I mean. You don't need a day-long session with an Olympic coach to have made that progress. I just some input early on, and I'm sure there's people out there who would have helped me, and I just got on with it on my own, and I guess I do regret that. I'm sure things might have turned out exactly the same, but I can't imagine it, because once you've learned bad habits, it's so hard to shift them. And I'm sure if I hadn't have learned those bad habits, maybe things would have gone better, or just differently,
Yeah, exactly. And I think having that, just even if it is these are the priorities, this is what you should focus on, just getting those fundamentals right. Like you said, I'm really happy you said bow training. I wanted you to say that, but I didn't want to. So I'm happy.
No, it's got to be done. And it's the only exercise I can notice when I don't do it. Now, there's been times where I've run 5K a day, not anymore, but I didn't, hand on heart, notice when I stopped that. But the only thing that affected my shooting on the line while I'm pointing at the target was the bow training, and it's not a huge time eater. And I think it's, if you can't be bothered to do that, you're probably, you probably can't be bothered to do anything.
So is that the reason, do you think, why compounds can maybe still be really, shooting at a good level, but not shooting as many arrows per week? Because often you'll see, maybe a compound archer shoots a few times per week and still is able to even maybe shoot 700, 690, that kind of thing, which is a really competent international level. But for a recurve, very rare to see that.
Yeah, a part of it is chicken and egg. Sadly, there's, compounds perform internationally without training full time because they don't earn enough money to train full time. Now, I would expect that most of those athletes, if they did train full time, would perform better. But also, I definitely realize in myself now that I'm an amateur and I don't really shoot, but I want to start going back to the club. I've decided I really want to go back to the club this year, and just for that social point of view. If I'm not going to shoot very often, I will shoot compound, because I know that to perform with a recurve, you just, without regular, consistent training, you're not going to do it. Whereas I know I can not shoot compound for 5 years, pick up my bow, and I can go and shoot a 640 and feel like I'm taking part in a competition. No, I'm not winning. I'm not setting the world on fire, but I am competent. Whereas if I didn't shoot recurve for 5 years and then I pick it up, which I have done for like little short tournaments, it's just painful. It's painful. It's difficult. I can't, I sold my old bow. You can't not shoot and then pick up a 53-pound compound, a 53-pound recurve, and go and do the club competition. You just can't do that. You can't. I remember when I hadn't shot for 6 months, I think either you or Kieran asked me to shoot my recurve, and after 6 months shooting a 53-pound bow, just so difficult.
Yeah.
Whereas I can do no training at all, pick up a 60-pound compound, and go and shoot it all weekend and take part, which I'd done once I'd done once at Longmynd after 4 years of no training at all, and you can do it. It's painful still, but nothing compared to the recurve. And with the recurve, as soon as you adjust the bow weight, you then need different arrows. Compound, as long as it's within 3 spines, just put them in and go. So I think from a recreational point of view, I will be a compound archer.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And I think I remember as well when you hadn't shot like compound for ages, and I think you just picked up someone else's compound, shot with a bent arm, shot kind of like this. And I think you shot something like, I want to say it was like 340 at 70 meters. It was hilarious to watch.
You can do it.
Because
it's because it's so much about, I still have the technique and the mental process with the release aid. So even with zero training, you can be competent. You can feel like you're taking part in the tournament. Whereas with a recurve, I can't shoot a competitive recurve without that strength. I couldn't believe how quickly I lost my muscles. And there's no point having a 53-pound recurve under the bed for the club competition, because you're not gonna get through the day. You might not get through the first end.
No, that's really interesting. In terms of, again, both with the compound recurve side of things, how do you look at a shot routine, and what do you think? Are there any key differences, recurve and compound, with a shot routine? And how would you advise anyone watching to use a shot routine? Yeah,
I think we go back to the part of the conversation we keep hitting on, is about when I switched over, I didn't change my shot routine. So I did still draw, anchor, which is stop, and then start the shot after that when you're aiming. So I didn't change my shot routine, and absolutely I should have done, and I did later on, further down my career, when I actually had professional coaches with me, and Lloyd Brown spent a lot of time trying to work on keeping that shot moving. And I changed my shot routine, as in with the compound I had very few key things that I would say or hit. With the recurve, I tried to make it a continual flow of saying things. So I would say hand when I'm putting my bow hand in. I would say fingers. I would say align, because I wanted to have a slightly deeper aligned hook. And then I would say draw. So I was trying to keep, with the recurve, I was trying to keep my mind busy the whole time through. Whereas with the compound, I was happy. I think I just had draw, anchor, relax, I think is all I had. Just those three things, and it wasn't a big thing trying to keep my brain busy. Whereas on the recurve, I had to keep my brain occupied all the way through the shot by saying these things in my mind. Whether that's the difference between a young athlete and an old athlete, an older athlete with more distractions and more demons, I don't know. But certainly with a recurve, having a shot routine that I talk through in my mind was priceless, and without that I really did crumble. Some would say I crumbled anyway, but
I'm not sure. But that's fascinating again, because that's a bit counterintuitive, because when you look at compound external, like from outside, you'd say, if I had to guess of one of them, I'd say the one where you want to be really distracting yourself with kind of a continuous shot routine might be the compound, because you've got a lot of time to just kind of sit, you can get there, sit there, and then you're just squeezing, waiting for it to go off. But actually, it sounds like the other way around a little bit.
But with the compound, my brain was totally and utterly immersed in aiming. Aim, nothing else. So I think
that's the bit.
That's the thing. And I don't know why I could never get my brain totally occupied and distracted with expansion with the recurve. But it's that visual thing. The brain wants to let the visual signals take over everything.
Yeah.
And with the compound, that seems to be fine. Now you might get some pro compounders who say otherwise, but it seems to be, my brain was so immersed in aiming that when I'm staring at something and taking it in, nothing else got through, So it was a different sort of shot routine whereas I needed those commands with the recurve to focus on physical things, or I would get distracted by the visual. And I didn't want to get distracted by the visual.
Yeah, because it's so easy. Your brain can see it, it wants to control it, and then everything else in terms of the expansion and pulling around here is behind you. You have no visual cue. So it's very.
And I think that's hard. Why on the recurve, why I benefited, and so many people benefit from having a large sight ring. Now some of your people, I mean a large sight ring with no crosshair, no dot, just a large open ring. My most successful score outdoors, which was a 673, which was a national record at the time. Again. It's a competitive score, it's not bad. The fact I could only do it once every blue moon, that was the problem. But that 673, that was done with a Biter 12mm sight ring with nothing in there. Just an open hole where I can see their entire target. The whole boss I can see through that sight ring. And yet that's enough to shoot 673.
Yeah.
Jay Bars, when he won the Olympics in 1988, have I got the right year there? I think I have. Yes, I have. He had a 22mm sight ring made out of a plumbing olive. Now, if that doesn't show you that 22mm. I didn't believe it when Lloyd Brown told me. But if you find a YouTube clip of Jay Bars winning the Olympics, you can get just a couple of seconds where you see that massive sight ring. So,
and that's probably like twice the size of the target, right?
Yeah, I would think so. My 12mm ring, I could see their entire boss. So 22mm is. So if you can win the Olympics with that sort of sight ring, if that doesn't tell you the recurve's not really about the aim, I don't know. I don't know what would.
What does?
But also, how many athletes out there have tried a 12mm open sight ring, let alone a 22?
Yeah.
And so often I see athletes year after year getting stuck at full draw, not able to get through the clicker, twitching on the clicker, over-aiming. And I tell them about to try an open sight ring and they just ignore me because they're convinced that aiming well and like getting a fiber optic pin on their recurve is going to bring them that score. Whereas I can give them so many examples where if they just shot the arrow better and quicker and better timed and more relaxed, they'd shoot 50 points more. But, you know.
Yeah.
Sometimes you
it's
can't.
Tricky, isn't it?
You can't force people to try something sometimes.
Yeah. And it's interesting. It also, sometimes, I don't know if you found this, even switching, sometimes I deliberately switch sight pins just to change them, even though I would then go back. So say, for example, I was shooting an open ring. Sometimes when I went from, your brain kind of adjusts to it very quickly, doesn't it? So you kind of get used. I used to find a way somehow to over-aim with an open ring sometimes.
Yeah.
I'd then switch back to a dot.
Okay.
And then for a little period, I'd find it a little bit more relaxing. And then sometimes I could switch back again and just to vary it up. I'd definitely encourage anyone watching to just go and try. Like, sight pins are not expensive, and you can actually make your own if you really want to.
I love that 12mm biter sight pin in black, and you can buy a packet of inserts of different sizes, so you can just drop them in. And also with that sight pin, you can clip on a bubble. So I use that sight pin in my toolkit at all times, because so many recurves, they're leaning over, put on that biter sight pin, put on the bubble, and then they can get some visual feedback and realize that they're leaning. Because unless you get feedback, how are you going to change? And unless you've got a coach there constantly telling you more upright, more to the left, or is that... So that sight pin, there's no reason why someone wouldn't spend money on having that sight pin in their toolbox, even if they never actually compete with it. But I used it the whole time. Yeah. And if you wanted to ruin my technique, give me a fiber optic pin. I think I would shoot better for... maybe for like 4 hours, 3-4 hours maybe, and then after that, I just slowly downhill.
It's funny. No, I definitely encourage that as well. And that bubble, I'm glad you said that. So if anyone's watching, this is something I use with my archers as well. So I think Mike and I both do this with the archers that we coach, is encourage putting that bubble on the 12mm sight pin. And if you're canting the bow, it's super sensitive. It's basically a spirit level, and the bubble will just go to one side. And it's been super helpful helping some of my archers to align their bow as well. And it sounds like the same for you. I think it's awesome. I don't think any other sight pin does it, right?
No, it's the only way. It's incredibly difficult to put a bubble on, like the Shibuya sight pin. Great sight pin, really successful, but it's really hard to get that feedback. You know, you can use a mirror, but you can only use the mirror for looking and drawing up, not for shooting. So I don't know any. The only way, if you want to correct an athlete, they need feedback. And unless you're there telling them, give them that sight bubble, say, see you next week, and they've had they can get feedback every shot. Yeah. But because it can be hard work. If you're used to leaning your bow over, it can be a real challenge to change that.
Yeah, because it feels straight.
Because it's normal. It's what feels right. You're used to seeing it on the... It helps nowadays when we have square targets. We have square bosses, not the circular ones. That does give you more feedback, but still, people can just be unaware, and it's not their fault. If they don't know they're leaning, how are they meant to correct it?
Exactly. No, I couldn't agree more with that. I'm glad you said that as well. In terms of a couple of kind of moving on to a little bit of a different area, what would you say is a common belief or idea that people have about recurve archery specifically that is wrong, or maybe leads them astray or limits them? So something that they think, we touched on one area already today in terms of that aiming, dynamic movement. Some people think about the aiming. Is there another belief that
aiming is the top one, but we've touched that. But I really mean that is number one. That is the number one principle that I believe is wrong and yet dominates so much. Yeah. Number two, I'm going to go with one that's more controversial.
Oh, that's good. I like that. Yeah.
And this is an elite conversation, but so often I would hear that poundage doesn't matter. My bow is fast enough to hit 70 meters, So what does it matter? A slow 10 is better than a fast 8. Well, of course it is.
Oh yeah, that's the.
But a fast 10 is better than, a slow 10 is better than a fast 8. And of course it is, but that doesn't help any of us. I think for a long time in Great Britain, people on the team were shooting low 40 pounds, and not for any reason. Now, if you had tried consistently to shoot 50 pounds and it doesn't work for you, and you can look me in the eye and say, I tried it, doesn't work for me, fair enough. But so often I feel people just stopped because they didn't need to change. But I can say for someone who stopped at 44 pounds, I think I stopped at 46 because Justin Hughes shot 46 pounds and I wanted to be Justin in some ways. But once I tried 52 pounds, I cannot believe the bow just feels totally and utterly different to me. And my performance I could get from it was totally different. Now, whether that's because it worked with my technique, whether it worked because I was a consistent trainer, I didn't miss training, week in, week out. I wasn't someone who ever suffered from injuries. I believe, again, that's because I just never didn't do the work. And shooting a high poundage bow just feels like magic. And then shooting a 46 pound bow just it's not as forgiving. Now, again, we go back to the scientist in me says, well, it doesn't matter how fast the arrow's going. And this has got nothing to do with wind drift. This is how forgiving the bow is when I make mistakes. So it's not to do with wind drift. It's not to do with arrow speed. I just think it's harder to deflect a big, heavy thing than it is a light thing. I'd much prefer to deflect a ping pong ball than I would a truck.
Yeah.
But I don't really... So I don't know. I don't know why that 52 pound bow is more forgiving with a bad release, with a bow hand that was soft. I just know that it is.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
And then I have to do this big speech marks if you can handle it.
Yeah. No, that's a good caveat, I guess. But I think for anyone watching who's on 42 pounds, don't go to 52 immediately.
Exactly.
But I think I think the principle is very good in terms of, I do definitely think the poundage also has an impact because, it is just common sense, it's physics, right? It goes back to the analogy of the arrow going to the target faster. But I think a good thing that you mentioned on there about is your training, like the amount of training you were doing as well. Whatever poundage, I like to think of it as a certain poundage has a certain maintenance level of work you need to do for a certain person. So like some people, like for myself, I'm a little bit less kind of built, I'm not so stocky. So for me to shoot a high poundage, I know that I need to shoot a lot of volume, I need to shoot a lot of arrows, a lot of bow training. Where someone who's a bit bigger build, generally a bit bigger, or maybe they go to the gym or whatever, they might need to shoot less arrows. So it's about knowing for you what that level is. Can you get away with shooting 52 pounds on maybe 500 arrows a week, or does it need to be 2,000 arrows a week? Very different numbers. But I think it sounds like you were very self-aware of what you were doing, and you knew, what you were doing there as well.
I think you're giving me too much credit. I think I just had a routine of I get up and I go to the archery club and I shoot all day. I don't think I had masses of science or analysis behind it. I just was a big routine person and I didn't have any distractions, and I always just done it. I remember losing having the most traumatic losing results, missing out on Olympic teams, and I was still there back at the club training within a day or two, whereas I know other people who then don't touch a bow for 6 months. It's just, I had a routine, and that it wasn't until I stopped my career and then a few months later I picked up a bow, I was like, oh my God, this bow wobbles. I had no idea what it was like shooting a bow when you're untrained. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, that's why some of my teammates and other people I know talk about all these different things, and I'd never experienced that. I just thought I could aim really well and I was gifted. No, I'm not gifted at all. I just worked really hard, and I didn't realize how bad a bow aims when you don't train. I was oblivious to it. It's
Yeah,
true.
exactly.
It was a
No,
shock.
think that's-
I couldn't
yeah.
believe how hard it is to shoot when you don't train, because I had never not trained in 20 years. There we go.
And then you've got used to that, and that volume's built up, and you've got used to that poundage as well. And as well, for anyone wondering about the poundage, your body gets used to it quite quickly. And again, I'm not saying to like suddenly go up in poundage, but if you shoot a 42 pound bow, and then you think it's too heavy, so you then go down to a 36 pound bow, after a few weeks, the 36 pound bow doesn't really feel light anymore. You get used to it. So it's all about having that training in between.
It's really hard to distinguish between what is muscle memory and what is your capacity, because so much of what you think is your capacity is just muscle memory. Because I can shoot 53 pound bow, I can do two ends with a 45 pound bow, and then I can't get my 53 pound bow through the clicker. Now, I haven't lost strength in those 30 minutes. It's just muscle memory, but it's really hard to distinguish between which is which, because your body just adapts so fast.
And then gets used to it super quick. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you do when you were shooting? I don't think I ever. I didn't notice this particularly, but did you used to do the kind of shooting with extra poundage or like band around the bow, that kind of thing when you were training?
No, I didn't, and I wish I did. I didn't. I don't think I really explored. And also, I know I got my best results at 52, 53 pounds. I don't know what 56 pounds is like. I feel bad that you should do it in a scientific way. You should take the weight up, for over several months, and then until you've found out what's too much, how do you know, where your capacity is? And obviously, like Nespoli from Italy, was it 56, 58? He shot at the London Games, and that year he got the European record for the 720 and an Olympic gold medal, and he knows that was, that worked for him. Whereas I'm also, I wasn't perfect. Even though I was a full-time athlete, I still didn't test a higher poundage. Because it costs money. You have to buy a pair of limbs. You have to then buy a set of arrows. Every time you change weight, it's not quite £1,000, but it's certainly, north of 500.
Yeah, it's not cheap, is it?
Yeah, it's easy to just stay where you are. Oh, I'll stay at 44. And I remember saying that to an athlete, and he's like, he needs to go up. And he's like, so I need to buy new arrows and new limbs? I've only just got 2 bows and 2 dozen arrows. And I'm like, I guess it's not good news.
Yeah, that's funny. No, I think that's really good, and I think I really want to kind of drive that home in terms of I really like your data-driven approach to doing it, and this is something that I saw when you were the Paralympic head coach as well, when you were coaching your athletes there. You mentioned it earlier as well. When I saw one of your athletes got some new stabilizers, and they were like, "These are the best things since sliced bread." It wasn't just like, okay then. I remember like multiple times with multiple different people, you would say, okay, show me, do the tests, give me the data. And you want the data. And I think that's so important.
But it is also so hard to generate. It's not easy, and it does drive you mad how frustrating it is to get the proof that something is better. But I think once you get that more scientific approach, I think that's why some of the best athletes change their equipment a lot less, because they know the workload in proving that these wooden limbs are better than these foam limbs. Proving that and then doing all the other testing is so time consuming. If you really want to find out what is the best bow for you, that's your whole year gone, which is fine. But then you don't see the top guys flipping between equipment because they know the work they put in to establish these are the best fletchings for me, to then just throw them in the bin to get some fluorescent pink ones that are transparent. They're not going to do that because they know it took me... I remember spending a whole indoor season really trying to work out which are the best fletchings for me. And then after I'd done it and I realised these stiffer fletchings were best, I realised I'd done all of that testing at 70 metres indoors, which is pretty worthless because then what I need to now go and test and work out what the best fletchings are in the wind.
Oh, no. Yeah.
And working out you get an extra 3 points per 3 dozen, or 1 point a dozen, that takes, dozens of dozens to see that data come through. And then you've got to go and do it in the wind, and the wind is never the same, and the wind is neither the same for each end. No, equipment testing is tough, but if you don't do it, you can, I made some royal mistakes earlier, I remember losing a whole season because I wanted to shoot the new bow that Browning had made. I can say Browning. They don't make bows anymore, really, I don't think. You know, they sponsored me. They made a new target bow, and I couldn't wait to shoot it, the Vanguard. And that was the terrible bow. That bow knocked 30 points off my score. But I kept persevering and trying, and I'd given my old bow back to the sponsor in exchange for the new one. There was no way back.
Oh, yeah.
You know. Yeah.
And then you're just hemorrhaging points.
You need that data, but that data is hard to come by.
Yeah. Oh man, no, that's fascinating. I think that's a really, really good point. And just to, I guess, before we finish up, a kind of little fun kind of question for you. If you could pick an archery competition to go to and shoot with a few kind of famous archers, past or present, and then maybe have dinner with them or whatever, what competition would it be, and who would you shoot / have dinner with?
I guess I would say the face-to-face tournament, which doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So in a reality...
That's fine, this past tournament.
But in reality, what would I do? I'd go to Las Vegas. What is the most... If I ever do a tournament again, what am I going to do? I'm going to go to Las Vegas, shoot recurve in the amateur section, and shoot against all the other retired athletes. We're all there. Yeah. We all want to go to Las Vegas. We all know we can't hack it anymore. So we put together our kit and we shoot the flight section in Vegas... recurve. You'll get more Olympic gold medalists on the line
than anywhere
in
else.
that flights tournament, and we can all have a good time, and we can all curse and swear and talk about how good it used to be, you know. So I will do that. I'm sure at some point I will go back and do that tournament, and yes, I'm not going to enter the Compound Pro. I'll enter the recurve flights, and I'll have a great time.
Vegas is awesome. Who would the people be that you, like, if you had to select a few people, let's say 3 people to kind of shoot on the same Vegas target with and then have some food with? Are there some like aspirational people that you...
Andreas Lorenz, always great to talk to. Good friend.
Mr. Biter for anyone who doesn't know.
Absolutely. And I used to be good to shoot there. You get to shoot with Jay Bars, you know, in reality, done a Vegas round with him. Rod White, you know, interesting guy. Justin Hoosh, I'm sure he'll be there as well. Just all people like that, people who are a part of my archery upbringing. You know, some of them I know really well, some of them I don't, and I'd like to get to know them more. And, you know, those 3 days at Vegas is a great opportunity, you know. Maybe Don Rabska, maybe even Lloyd Brown will be there shooting one day. Yeah. Who knows? George Technichov, but George is probably in the pro section because he can still shoot well, you know. But any of those guys, because we've all had a life in archery and, all different, but it's great to catch up with those people.
Yeah. No, definitely. I love Vegas, and I think, the flights is super cool. If anyone watching has not done it, obviously when the whole craziness of COVID is over, I definitely recommend Vegas. Great excuse to go there anyway.
Absolutely. Well. And I'm sure, I can't imagine that I won't do another Vegas, because it's great fun. Great fun.
Absolutely. No, thanks so much for your time today, Mike. This has been really awesome, just from my point of view, to have a chat anyway, because it's always nice to have a chat.
Thank you. No, it's been really good.
Anyway, but
if anyone's got any questions, I'm happy to talk about it. We can do another one maybe. Who knows?
Yeah, absolutely. Let us know in the comments below if you've got any questions. And then also, I said at the start, but if anyone wants to get in contact with you, where should they kind of go on, like your website, that kind of thing? Just remind them where to go.
Yeah, archerymichael.com or michaelpeart.com. Perfect. Do a Google search, find me there. You can contact me through there. I'm available. Online coaching, face-to-face coaching, seminars, all there. Awesome. Turn my hand to it all.
That's great. Thanks so much again, Mike. And thanks everyone else for watching as well.